I woke up before dawn, the sky still bruised with the last traces of night. The floorboards creaked under my slippers as I moved quietly through the house. Even now, months after Walter had gone, I caught myself expecting to hear his voice drifting from the kitchen, humming low over the sound of percolating coffee. But there was only the hush of an empty house and the old clock ticking its steady reminder that time didn't care who it left behind. I tied my robe tighter around my waist and walked to the garage. It had become a ritual dusting the Mustang every Sunday morning. Walter called it his second love, though he always winked at me when he said it, as if to reassure me that I still came first. He had spent countless weekends tuning its engine and polishing the chrome to a mirror shine. Even in winter, he would pull back the cover and run his hand along the fender like greeting an old friend. I pressed my palm to the door, bracing for the faint smell of motor oil and leather, something that made me feel close to him in a way nothing else did. But when I opened it, the cold air rushed past me into a space that was hollow and wrong. The Mustang was gone. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, illuminating nothing but a patch of dust on the concrete where the tires used to rest. For a moment, I stood there, unable to step forward. My breath snagged in my chest, and I had to press a hand to the workbench to keep my balance. I blinked hard, hoping it was some trick of the hour or my tired eyes. But it wasn't. I searched every corner as though a car could vanish into a shadow. I opened the side door, thinking perhaps though I knew better that it might be parked in the drive. But the driveway was empty too, a slab of wet pavement glinting under the porch light. I went back inside and picked up the phone with trembling fingers dialing Marina's number. When it rang to voicemail, I set it down gently and sank into the kitchen chair, listening to the silence as it settled thick around me. I didn't move from that chair for what felt like hours. The kitchen grew brighter as the sun climbed higher, light sliding across the linoleum floor, catching on the chipped edge of the table where Walter used to sit with his coffee and the Sunday paper. I pressed my palm to that spot, needing something solid to anchor me, because nothing else felt real. When the phone finally rang, I snatched it up so quickly I almost dropped it. Marina's name glowed on the screen. My throat closed, but I forced my voice steady. "Marina," I said. "Where is the Mustang?" For a moment, all I heard was the hush of her breathing. Then she cleared her throat, her tone wrapped in that brittle softness she used when she was trying to sound reasonable. "Mom," she began. "I was going to call you sooner, but what?" My voice came out hoarse. "It's gone. You took it." She didn't deny it. Instead, I heard Clark's voice low in the background, saying something I couldn't make out. When she spoke again, her words tumbled out too fast. Clark needed startup money for the boutique lease. It was just sitting there, Mom. "You never even drive it." I pressed my hand to my chest, as if that would keep my heart from breaking open. "That car was your father's." "I know," she whispered. "But you have the house, all his things. We thought you'd understand." The way she said we cut deeper than any blade. As if she'd rehearsed this with Clark, as if my grief was a hurdle they'd simply stepped over. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. "You didn't even ask me." "It was only a car," she said quietly, as though that settled everything. I couldn't find my voice to answer. I set the receiver down careful, as if it might shatter, and stared at the countertop, tracing the faint stain where Walter had spilled coffee years ago. In that moment, I felt something in me shift, something old and tired, giving way to a cold clarity I hadn't known I still possessed. When the phone rang again, I let it ring. I didn't pick up when Marina called back, or when she tried again hours later. Each ring felt like a needle pressing into my skin, but I stayed in my chair, hands folded in my lap, willing my heart to stop clenching around the hollow place their betrayal had left behind. By evening, The house was dark, except for the single lamp above the sink. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even boiled water for tea. I kept thinking if I sat there long enough, I'd hear Walter's key in the lock, hear him telling me it was all a mistake. But the house stayed silent. It was just after dawn the next morning when the phone rang again. I nearly ignored it, sure it was Marina with another apology that would only bruise us both. But something in me couldn't let it ring unanswered this time. I picked up, pressing the receiver to my ear with a hand that didn't feel like mine. "Mrs. Bramwell," a man's voice asked. "I hope this isn't too early." I swallowed my throat dry. "Who is this?" "My name is Adrian Cole. I believe we haven't met, but I'm the one who purchased your husband's Mustang." His words sank in slowly, like a stone dropping through water. My heart fluttered once then, settled into a tight ache. "You bought it." My voice was almost a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. And I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important." He paused, his breath catching just enough that I knew this wasn't a call he wanted to make. When I brought the car into my shop to begin cleaning it up, I found something hidden behind the passenger seat. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingertips to my temple. "What did you find?" "An envelope, sealed with your name on it." The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. My free hand drifted to the edge of the table, searching for something steady to hold on to. "I think," he said gently, "it was left there for you." I gripped the phone tighter, feeling the first fragile stirrings of something I hadn't felt in a long time, the faintest flicker of purpose. I don't remember hanging up the phone or pulling on my coat. All I knew was that I had to see it for myself. The envelope, Walter's handwriting, some last tether between us I hadn't even known existed. My hands were trembling so badly I nearly dropped my keys twice before I managed to start the car. The drive to Adrian's workshop blurred past in a hush of frost on the windshield and the dull thud of my heart in my ears. I tried not to think of Marina of Clark, of all the small betrayals that had piled up over the years, until this final one had split me open. I focused only on Walter, on the Mustang, on the thought that maybe in his quiet way, he'd known there would come a day when I needed something more than memories. Adrian met me outside. He was younger than I expected, hair pulled back at his neck, eyes kind but wary, as though he wasn't sure how I'd receive what he'd found. He didn't say much, just led me to the garage bay, where the Mustang waited, its blue paint still as bright as I remembered. He held out the envelope with both hands, careful, like it was something sacred. I took it slowly. My breath hitched when I saw the familiar slant of Walter's writing across the front Leona. My name plain and unadorned, but carrying the weight of everything we had shared. I slipped my finger under the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a brass key tarnished with age. My vision blurred as I read his words. "Leona, if you are holding this, it means the car has passed to someone else. And it means you need to know what I couldn't tell you then. This key is for the safe deposit box at Vermont Federal Savings. Box 45. Everything in it belongs to you alone, no one else." My hand drifted to the key. I felt its cool weight in my palm and closed my fingers around it. When I looked up, Adrian was watching me quietly, and for the first time in days, I felt something like steadiness return to my spine. I didn't go home. I couldn't bear to sit in that kitchen another hour, listening to the house echo around me like it was hollow. Instead, I drove straight to Vermont Federal Savings. My hands were steady on the wheel, steadier than they had any right to be. It was as though some part of me had been waiting for this all along, for Walter to reach out one last time and remind me I wasn't as alone as I felt. The teller was polite but cautious when I explained why I was there. She took the key from my hand and examined it, then disappeared into a back office with a promise she'd only be a moment. My heart thudded in the quiet, but I felt no urge to turn away. I had been timid too long. Whatever was waiting in that box, I was ready to face it. When she returned, she gestured for me to follow her down a short hallway lined with numbered doors. She unlocked box 45 and set it before me on the small table. My breath came faster, but I forced myself to lift the lid without hesitating. Inside lay a manila folder and a smaller blue envelope. I reached for the folder. First hands, clumsy with anticipation. The deed on top was crisp and unmistakable. A lakeside cottage Walter and I had once visited in the early years of our marriage. Beneath the deed sat a savings ledger. The numbers so large I had to blink to be sure I was seeing them correctly. Over $120,000 in my name alone, accumulated in quiet deposits I had never known about. I touched the edge of the paper as tears slid hot and silent down my cheeks. He must have been planning this for years, even before his illness, saving in secret, because he knew how easily I gave everything away, because he knew one day I'd have nothing left but a handful of memories and the ache of other people's choices. I picked up the blue envelope last. The note inside was short, but in Walter's clear, patient hand. You always gave your whole heart to everyone else. This is for you, Leona, so you never have to ask anyone for permission to live. I folded the note carefully, slipped it into my purse, and felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest as I walked back to my car. I drove home with the deed and ledger on the passenger seat, glancing at them every few blocks as if they might vanish if I looked away too long. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart had steadied into something hard and clear. All the years I had spent softening the edges for everyone else, all the times I had swallowed my pride, none of that mattered anymore. The porch light was already on. I knew before I opened the door that Marina and Clark were waiting. I stepped inside, clutching my purse to my chest, and found them sitting at the kitchen table like they owned it. Clark didn't bother to stand. He leaned back in his chair, his smile practiced and thin. Leona, he began, his tone smooth as polished stone. We need to have a conversation about the money from the car. There are some expenses we hoped you'd help us cover. I hung my coat on the hook by the door and walked to the table. Slowly, deliberately, I set the deed and the ledger down in front of them. Marina reached for the papers, but I placed my hand over hers and met her eyes. No, I said. We're going to have a conversation about what you took from me. Marina looked away. First, her mouth pressed into a tight line. Clark gave a small, incredulous laugh. Leona, let's be reasonable. It was just a car. It was not just a car. I said, my voice so calm, it surprised me. It was the last thing your father loved. You sold it like it was nothing. Marina's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. I let the silence stretch until even Clark shifted uncomfortably. I want you both to understand, I continued, that you have no claim over me or over anything Walter left behind. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I folded the ledger closed and straightened my back. I won't be helping you. Not with the boutique. Not with anything else. Clark opened his mouth, but I raised my hand to stop him. I'm done. I turned and walked to the hall closet, reaching for the small suitcase I'd kept tucked behind the coats, and knew exactly where I would go. I didn't look back at them as I carried my suitcase into the living room. It was light, only half full, just the things that mattered most. A few clothes, my wedding album, Walter's letters. Everything else could stay behind a life I no longer needed to shoulder. Marina followed me, her voice breaking as she called my name. I paused by the mantel where Walter's photograph rested, tracing the frame with my fingertip before I turned to face her. Mom, she whispered. Please, you don't have to do this. We're still family. Her face was so young and scared that for one flicker of a moment I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the empty garage, the way she had said it was just sitting there, and the way Clark had looked at me as if I were a foolish old woman with nothing left to claim. I love you, I told her, and it was the truest thing I'd said all day. but I will not be small for you again." Clark came to stand behind her. His arms folded. He didn't try to hide his disdain. "Where exactly do you think you're going?" he asked. I lifted my chin. "Somewhere I don't have to ask that question." He let out a short, humorless laugh, but Marina just looked away, her shoulders folding in on themselves. She knew I meant it. She knew in her heart there would be no persuading me. I walked past them to the front door. My hand was steady as I reached for the keys hanging on the hook. I pulled the house key free and laid it carefully on the side table. "You'll need to pack your things," I said, my voice as level as I could make it. "I'm selling the house." "You have until the end of the month." Marina made a small sound like a gasp, but I didn't look back. I stepped out into the cool morning air, closing the door gently behind me, and felt the strangest, cleanest relief. I walked to my car, opened the trunk, and placed my suitcase inside. The engine rumbled to life beneath my hands, and for a moment I sat there in the driveway, watching the curtains flutter behind the front windows. Part of me thought Marina might come running out, begging me to stay, or at least to reconsider, but the house stayed still. No footsteps. No apologies. Just the quiet confirmation that we had reached the end of something neither of us knew how to fix. I eased the car into gear and turned onto the road. The houses blurred by in a parade of tidy lawns and familiar porches. I'd driven this route hundreds of times, but never with my entire past folded neatly into a single suitcase. I felt light and heavy all at once, as if every mile put more space between the woman I had been and the one I was finally allowing myself to become. When I reached the lake road, I pulled over and let my eyes rest on the water. It was still the morning mist lifting in soft curls, and I thought about the cottage deed now locked in the glove compartment. Walter's last gift. A place of my own, untouched by expectation or guilt. I didn't linger. I had called Lucinda the night before, and she had promised to meet me at the cottage with a spare key. The drive was longer than I remembered, but I didn't mind. Every turn of the road felt like a small promise that I hadn't lost everything, just the parts I no longer needed. Lucinda's car was already there when I arrived. She stood on the porch, waving her smile wide and unguarded. When I stepped out, she pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and old paper, and for the first time in days, my chest loosened enough to let in air. We didn't talk much. We carried in my suitcase the small box of photographs, the envelope with the ledger, and the deed. When she left, I stood in the center of the living room, listening to the hush that filled the space like a benediction. I set Walter's photograph on the windowsill and knew I was exactly where I needed to be. I hadn't been at the cottage a week before Clark found me. I knew he would come eventually. He always struck me as the sort of man who couldn't stand being told no, especially by someone he thought too old to mean it. Still, when his car pulled up the gravel drive, my stomach tightened. But I stayed by the window, watching him step out in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, looking absurdly formal in this place that didn't belong to him. He didn't bother to knock. He rapped once on the door, then opened it without waiting for an answer. I turned, keeping my back straight, as he walked in like he owned the walls around us. "You're making a fool of yourself," he said. His voice clipped, like he was already tired of explaining something obvious. "Do you really think selling the house is going to change anything?" Marina is devastated. I felt my jaw tighten. "Marina is a grown woman," I said calmly. "She made her choices." He took a step closer. "You're punishing her because you're lonely. Because you can't stand that you're not needed anymore." I let the words hang there. Once I might have flinched under that kind of accusation. Once I might have believed it. But all I felt now was a tired kind of clarity. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm protecting what's left of me." His mouth twisted. "You think this is strength, running away to some rundown cabin?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The steady quiet of the cottage spoke for me. The truth of it was so plain, it almost felt like a kindness. He looked around as if trying to find some flaw to point out some weakness to exploit. "You don't get to define my worth?" I told him, my voice low but unshaking. He went still, blinking, like he hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Then he turned every movement sharp with insult and left without another word. I watched his car retreat down the drive, dust rising in its wake, and when it was gone, I closed the door and felt something lift from my chest. In the weeks that followed, the days settled into a rhythm so quiet it felt like a kind of healing. Each morning, I rose before dawn, brewed my coffee, and sat on the porch to watch the lake shift from silver to blue as the sun climbed higher. I painted again for the first time in years, nothing ambitious, just the shapes of trees and the soft ripples of water. My hands were clumsy at first, but it didn't matter. The simple act of creating something that belonged to no one else was enough. One afternoon, I pulled out the small box of letters Walter had written me when we were first married. I read them slowly, letting the words fill all the empty corners of the cottage. I found I could smile without feeling that ache behind my ribs. I could remember him with gratitude instead of the raw edge of loss. He had loved me well. He had left me prepared, even if I hadn't understood it then. A letter arrived from Marina a few days later. Her handwriting was shaky, uneven across the page. She apologized in looping sentences, said she hadn't known how to stop Clark or how to stand up to him. She wrote that she understood why I'd gone, though she wished I hadn't. I read the letter twice before folding it neatly and sliding it into the drawer with Walter's notes. I didn't know yet if I would write back. One evening near dusk, I made a cup of tea and carried it out to the porch. The water was calm, holding the reflection of the clouds overhead. I held the warm mug against my chest and closed my eyes, feeling the hush of this place settle around me. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to make myself small enough to fit everyone else's expectations. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. And in the space that had been left behind, something new was beginning to take root, something I could finally claim as mine alone.